Quote of the week. Sometimes you have to scorch everything to start over. Words to not live by. So, Season 1, Episode 8, Little Fires Everywhere. Season finale, possibly the finale of the whole show. I have thoughts, but before I get into that, if you're enjoying this video and if you want to see more videos on this channel, please consider subscribing. And if you like anything I say, please give me a like. I appreciate it. So getting into this episode, which was titled Find a Way, which is kind of on the nose, not my favorite title this season. The biggest thing that I think people are going to talk about after this episode is how the ending diverges quite a bit from the book. Now, if you haven't read the book, you probably think that this ending made sense because they've kind of built up to it. But to me, there are some problems with this ending. I feel that it doesn't really make sense for the Richardson kids to literally burn down the house, especially since Mia said this line to Izzy. Now, Izzy might have inspired them to follow through on her brilliant idea, which apparently Izzy doesn't get metaphors and she thinks that she has to literally burn down the house in order to start over. But I just don't feel that it really logically makes sense that 3 teenagers, one of whom is almost an adult, would get together and be like, hey, this is a good idea. Let's burn down the house. That will show Mom. I just don't buy it. And also I think it's pretty... I've always had a problem with this ending. I get that it's supposed to be like this metaphor that kind of strikes at the root of the Richardsons' problem, which is that their materialistic tendencies, they're being so focused on maintaining the status quo that they've grown accustomed to, that the only way to get at that is for the house to be destroyed. So I get that the house had to be destroyed, but I think that when Izzy does it in the book, you could kind of view it as, a teenager striking out. You could choose to view it as potentially a mixed bag of a thing. But when it's 3, kids who have come together and decided to do this with a purpose, it's a little bit harder to just dismiss it. This is quite illustrative of something that I have a problem with in this story, which is that every time the characters strike out against conventionality, it's kind of done in very, very harmful ways. Now, some of it's very, very understandable, and I think it might work within the story. And, you can say, it's just a story, why are you getting down on it? But this story has a message, and you're kidding yourself if you don't think it does. And the message seems to be that we need to go about and set little fires everywhere that will disrupt the conventional patterns that people have kind of set up in their lives. And in this particular case, it's not hard to draw the line from what Mia tells Izzy to the burning down of the house, which obviously, it has some symbolic aspects to it. But if you take it as a literal burning down of a house, it's just destructive behavior, and it's not something that any adult should encourage. And all the other aspects of striking out against Elena and her brand of, saying everyone has to follow the rules and that's how everyone is going to be happy and successful. Izzy running away at the end, which she doesn't end up with Pearl and Mia, she's striking out on her own. That's not a good thing. She's really way too young to be out on her own. She could get sexually assaulted. All sorts of bad things could happen to her. And I get that she's frustrated with her mom, but this isn't going to solve that. And, obviously, I think people are going to have very mixed feelings about Bebe kidnapping. And it is kidnapping, legally speaking, even if you think that the child belongs to her. Legally speaking, she has kidnapped Mei Ling, or Arabella, as the McCulloughs have called her. And I did appreciate that this episode finally gave Linda McCullough, played by Rosemarie DeWitt, a little bit more sympathy. It showed the child calling her mama, which is something they didn't really have happen in the book to my recollection. In the book, they made it pretty obvious that no, she doesn't recognize this lady as her mother, and the minute that she sees Bebe, she just knows it's her mother, even though she hasn't seen her since she left her on the porch when she was a little child and she caught frostbite. But she just knows it's her mother, and she stops crying when she's with her. So that's what the book did. But here, realistically, she's been raised by Linda for far longer than she was with Bebe, and she's starting to call her mama. Do we really think that she's going to be happy, at least in the short term, to have her life disrupted like this? I think it's sketchy. As a parent, the whole scene with the baby monitor freaked me out a little bit, because to imagine, my son being taken like that, even if it wasn't my adopted son, it's someone that she views as her daughter. To imagine Linda McCullough going through that is just really, really hard, and I feel like she deserves sympathy, even if you can sympathize with Bebe in this situation as well. I felt like this episode did do a better job of kind of articulating some of the problems with this family adopting Bebe's child. And, I think it's a debatable issue, but I felt like this show has spurred a lot of interesting discussions in my household, so I do have to give it credit for that, even if I don't agree with every conclusion. But basically all the characters that struck out to do, we're not going to stand for this conventionality, we're going to do our own thing, all the decisions they made to me were really destructive and harmful, and I have a problem with that. Now, I'm glad that they did paint Elena in a very sympathetic light at the end of this episode. I felt like in her conversation with Bill, it was very obvious that neither of them was completely in the right. But I was very much I was against Elena completely in her conversation with Mia, which is odd because I usually find myself at least somewhat sympathizing with her. But this episode, she just had gone too far in too many ways, and there was just nothing I could say to justify her, and nothing she could say to justify herself. And she was just incredibly petty, and she took some very decisively vindictive actions against Mia. And, I was proud of Mia the way that she just stood her ground and wouldn't let Elena talk down to her or, make up stuff that she had done wrong when Elena had this log in her own eye, to quote the Bible, that she's not able to see. So I appreciated that, and that scene was very strong. I felt like this episode on the whole had a lot of very strong scenes. I really liked the way it ended with Pearl's poem and the music playing. I thought that was very powerful. And I was glad Mia kind of admitted some of the things that I have said, which is that she shouldn't have made that decision for Pearl to never let her know her birth father, to lie to him, to tell him that his daughter had died. And I'm glad that they went to go see him, but I feel like we don't actually need to see her birth father. I think we can leave that to our imaginations, and pretty much everything that happens after this point could be left to my imagination. I don't need another season. Like I said, I feel like it would just feel like an unnecessary epilogue. But overall, the ending is what's going to really surprise people, and from an emotional standpoint, I thought it was satisfying because I feel like it redeemed Tripp and Moody and Lexi in a way that they weren't redeemed in the book. I'm glad that Lexi finally admitted the things that she had done to her mother and let Elena have no illusions about what was going on in her own house. And I'm glad that the kids, came together in that way. I felt like that was a positive thing, but I feel like, obviously it's what happens in the book, so they have to have the house burned down. But the circumstances were different in the book, and enough things got changed that I just felt like it was not very realistic in the show, and it just seemed far-fetched. And again, not very constructive. But that's neither here nor there. It's just a story, so I guess I can just deal with it and accept it as a metaphor for how we have to turn our back on our material possessions and on our lifestyles in order to find new purpose and in order to move away from the ashes. So I enjoyed this episode. I thought it was the highlight of the season. Very strong way to go out. I would definitely recommend the show to people who haven't seen it based on this episode. So overall, positive feelings about this show, even though I feel angry and confused at the same time about a lot of the things that happen. But that's how a lot of great shows are. They leave you feeling angry and confused at the same time as you feel that they are worth watching. So if you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. That's my review of Little Fires Everywhere Season 1, Episode 8, Find a Way.